Hey folks, welcome to the Tracker Family Update. I guess that's a good name for it. I'm reluctant to use the term emergency, though that pretty much there isn't a day that passes that you couldn't have something dealing with an emergency. It's times like this when we can all get together in a short time that we can kind of touch base real quick and connect with each other, even though it's through this cyber element here. At least it is some semblance of people gathering together for a greater good. I like to call it then the Tracker Family Update. At times like this too, I really miss Grandfather because he prophesied this, but he also, I would have loved to had him see it, in the flesh. It's something that, won't happen. It'll wait to the other side, so to speak. What I want to do tonight is just touch base with you on a couple of issues that we're dealing with and to plant a seed, so to speak, and get you working on some things. First of all, I had a conversation a couple of days ago with a very close brother who's also an advisor of the Tracker School. And part of his vision, like mine, is to get a piece of property down in Central America and then begin to create a training village down there where it will be an ongoing thing. People can commit to it for 6 months or a year. In fact, he was even saying he'd fly people down to make sure that they're being educated. And this way, within the Tracker community, they're not only building a town, so to speak, a community that is self-sufficient, but also in the process we're training key individuals. And then after they do their time down there, then new ones come in. Not everybody will leave and come at the same time. And that's one of the things that he and I are going to be, and a number of other people are involved with it right now, are going to be working on in the next months to come. And basically, it's the sooner the better, especially, as you know, with the way things are going out there. The other thing that I'm trying to push, and I've already got a couple set up, or rather Tracker students, keepers, healers have set them up as healing centers. Eventually connected with our webpage once they get up and going, where if a tracker or even somebody related to the Tracker community is just in need of a good conversation to help them along, or a hug or whatever else, or a non-modern method of healing, they have a place to go and to seek help. And shortly I'm going to be announcing a couple of them. One is going to be up and running in California very soon, and we already have one running here, kind of Charlie and Meredith take that into, play. But anyway, those are the two major things that's in the works right now. The other thing is that, this kind of program here where we can get together maybe once a month or once every 6 weeks might be a good idea. With the acceleration of the collapse and everything that is involved around it, I think that the frequency of meeting between the Tracker family and myself, and even your feedback in what's going on in your area and stuff like that, cautionary tales, so to speak, could be aired during this, this kind of forum here. You think about how people are hit by these bizarre events that take place. And years ago, I warned of flesh walkers. where people on the edge of a mental breakdown or anguish or whatever else are momentarily taken over by a dark entity or force causing them to do heinous acts. And we just had one of them, recently here with the shooting in the school down in Florida. Well, talk about hitting close to home. Cody's roommate, Cody's here visiting tonight, his friend is a teacher there. And she lost a couple of very close teacher friends and a mess of students. And he's only a couple of miles from the event. I mean, it's just like things are getting closer and closer and closer. I mean, out in Las Vegas, I know that Tom Frank lost a couple of really close friends. And it's getting closer to everybody's doorstep. It's no longer, is it happening someplace else in the world? It's happening right here and now. And as you know, it's going to accelerate. I warned you of this, 5 years or so ago when I started to do these programs, especially the online, which deal with the collapse. Pretty much everything grandfather and the lineage had said in their visions and prophecies has come true. The only troubling part is it's come true faster than anybody ever imagined. At one point there was a trilogy of probable futures and we sort of took the middle road. But the more I think about it, I'm thinking we took the accelerated route to the collapse. And that's my big concern right now is how many years do we have left, as a world or as a global society and as the earth. When I say the world, I'm talking about the infrastructure of humankind. When I say the earth, I'm talking about Earth Mother. And this, in the end, the earth will win out. If you've ever looked at an abandoned building or abandoned factory, it isn't long before Earth Mother is crumbling it big time. And windows are busted out, it collapses, trees grow up, and that's it, it's erased. But, the problem is how many species are going to be gone by the time, the earth can start repairing herself. The damage may be so great that it may take countless thousands of years for repair. Even Cody, who's in a chef, he says that he's reluctant to order any kind of fish for the restaurant because that whole industry is near collapse. We have just about decimated the entire fish population of the world. Everything is out of balance. And whole species of fish are becoming so scarce, it's unimaginable. Anyway, we have to take a quick break here I'm not going to go a full 10 minutes, just about 5-6 minutes, just so we can check our systems here, that you're up and running. And we'll get back together in, let's say, 6 minutes or so. Is that enough time, Dave? Okay, let's do it. Hey, folks, welcome back. I just on a side note, you'll notice that, the classes that we run at the Tracker School for the year are changing markedly. We're still doing, of course, the standard, the advanced tracking and awareness, Scout series and things like that, philosophy temples. But a lot of the other classes I'm gearing for the students that have been around for a while, or those students who are just beginning and want to take it to the max as fast as they can. And I think that's a metamorphosis of the school that's happening because of the world we're living in today. I tell you, I'm scared to death about what's going to happen. and it isn't going to be pretty. Let's talk about the analysis of collapse. Now, some of these things that I'm going to go over tonight are you've had before, but I want to reiterate them, and I want to make sure that we're on the same page with our thinking. When you look at the analysis of the collapse, way back when I decided to go out on a limb and talk about the evolution of grandfather's prophecies, and I said my biggest fear was being like a person standing in the middle of Fifth Avenue and, whatever, in New York with a sign that the, world is falling, or failing or whatever, coming to an end. And, I had people out there that says, this is never going to happen and all this other stuff. Well, take a look back over the last 5 to 7 years. Never going to happen? Practically every element, now every damn element grandfather talked about came true. From the flesh walkers to diseases to the horrific storms we're getting, you name it, across the board, to loss of species, starvation. Oh God, it's out of hand. But anyway, you look at what's unfolding and you remember what grandfather said. I remember him saying to me more than once, and it's the way he said it that was quite disturbing. He told me that according to him and the lineage, I will be his age when the red skies appear. I met him when he was 83. I was 7. So that means in the year 2032, 33, the red skies are going to come. But he said that it's the way he said it. He said it's not a question of whether the red skies are going to come or not. It's how many people are going to be there to witness them. And he said that in such a way that there was such sorrow and anguish in his voice. Needless to say, tears in his eyes. We talked about the advent of the red skies, that transition. And he said what worried him is the 10 years leading up to those red skies where everything is going to accelerate to an unimaginable rate. That's what led him to say how many people are going to witness the red skies. So he talked about this 10 years leading up to it. You figure that would be 2022, 2023. That means we have 5 years left before that starts. And that's scary. That's beyond scary. That's horrific. And I'm trying to take steps now into getting information out to you to try to keep you and your family safe, for warnings and places to go and everything else. That's why we're going to be setting up this community down someplace in Central America to train people. On-the-job training is fine, but, be slammed in the middle of a rainforest where half the stuff there can kill you if you're wrong is not a way to learn, unless you're deeply spiritual and can sense the difference between a poisonous plant and an edible plant. You're going to be dead in short order. But even the class I'm doing tomorrow, which is kind of a neat one. It's called Home Bunkers. It's not like anything you think. When people see that on the write-up for the class, they think, okay, it's something in the cellar with food, ammunition, and cattle. It's anything but. It's what you call a home bunker from the point of way of the scout, with all the deception and camouflage and false routes and everything else that go with it. It's quite interesting. But anyway, I really started to hit the prayer of warning. And I asked people, I begged people every morning and every evening, when you set aside that personal time, that sacred time, Grandfather called it, and to him it was an unspoken rule, that you cry up to the Creator to be forewarned if any of your family members or you are going to blunder into danger. And I ask you to say that prayer whenever possible, but lately I've modified it. Instead of just saying it like a prayer, even an empowered prayer, it should be at the level of the temples of the soul. In other words, that same place where you take a question, where you say, what am I feeling? And you go deep with that question, non-judgmentally, kind and loving, nurturing manner. And then surrender. Pay attention to what comes back. This temples of the soul, if you go deep enough, you get to the Creator and creation's power. And that's where that prayer of warning should originate, from deep within the temples. And it's not just once or twice a day you should do that. You should do that whenever you get a chance, especially now, so that you will be forewarned if you're about to blunder into a dangerous situation or one of your family members. Could be a toxic chemical spill, God knows, a radiation leak, or a potential shooting that you would have blundered into. The danger with this, in the world we live in, with our computers and our cell phones and traffic jams and screaming sirens and yammering people, oftentimes we miss the warning. That's why I suggest you don't do it once, this warning prayer. You do it whenever possible for the rest of your life. So that if your family member is out doing something and they're getting close to danger, you're going to know about it. But you got to pause throughout the day. That's a given. Grandfather used to do that. At first, we thought he was lost. You know, we'd be out in the bush someplace and he'd stop, dead. He never moved fast anyway. And he'd look around. To the untrained eye, it looked like a man that was lost. And even Rick and I, when we first, were with him that first week, we thought, oh my God, the old man is lost his way. We didn't realize that he was doing a number of things. Number one, he was pausing, stopping to allow his concentric rings to diminish so he could read the concentric rings outside of himself, what's called the baseline symphony, undisturbed by his existence. But the other thing he was doing was going into that sacred pause, which is actually more than that. It's where thoughts vanish, where you reach out with your awareness. That way, and it only takes a few moments or 5 minutes, there'll be no early warning that escapes you. But far too often, because of the world we come from, the rush and din and chaos, the madness that surrounds us, even when we go home and we're still caught up in that rush, we don't hear the warning. So at first, the pause. Grandfather called it sacred time. morning and evening. But he also suggested in our younger years that we pause, but not just pause, we pause and surrender. Surrender to life, surrender to whatever environment we're in. Surrender is not losing a battle. Surrendering is entering the consciousness of no time, no destination, no expectation, no past, and no future. The problem is with surrender is when you deeply and profoundly surrender, you lose yourself. For a moment, you cease to exist, which is a good thing in a way. At first. And then what you find yourself doing when you completely surrender, out of that nothingness comes an image or a word or a feeling or a series of them. And that's you tapping into a deeper spiritual communication, an early warning possibly, or things we might have normally missed. And it gives us time to assess, even if it's only for a moment. It's not a big deal. You don't even have to stop. You just have to surrender and pay attention to what comes back. But there's something even greater than surrender. That's called the silence. The silence. I just finished a class on the hidden secrets of silence. The folks did very, very well with it. I was shocked with some of the stuff they were coming back with. I believe, as grandfather believed, that silence is even more important than your daily devotions. It's infinitely more important and powerful than surrender. So what's the difference between silence and surrender? As I said, in surrender you lose the self. Time, destination, expectation are gone. So too with the physical mind and emotion. They're set aside for a moment. And you pay attention to what returns from that abyss of nothingness, which is pure. In the silence, however, what grandfather said of our physical mind is that our mind is at once our greatest enemy and our greatest ally. In silence, you only get rid of the enemy part of your mind. You see, when you slip into silence, you don't surrender to the silence, you just move into it. In the silence, there are no words, no definitions, no qualifiers, no judgments. There is no past and no future. What the silence is the eternal now lived now. If you bring up a word, you learned that word long ago, and it's wrought with the prejudice that surrounded it as you learned it. To bring it into the purity of your now, which is all we really have, is to taint it and defile it. Why do you think grandfather said before Rick and I went out on an excursion to learn something from an old piney, he said what every other tribe said to their children, forget you have a past. That's another way of saying go into the now. When you're in the eternal now, you have no past, you have no future. You have no words, you have no judgments. you're in a state of purity. But the other thing that happens when you go into the silence is suddenly you find yourself in this acute awareness. Awareness like you've never felt before. It's a dividend. It's part of the eternal now. It's like something where everything comes so alive, so powerful. It's almost overwhelming. It is overwhelming. And it's not just on a physical level. It's on a force level, a spiritual level, a sacred silence level, even on a temple's level. And when you hit into that kind of acute awareness, do you think any early warning can escape you? Certainly not when you're living in the now. So more so than that sacred pause and then going into surrender, what I beg people to do is go into the silence. In the silence, you don't go blank, so to speak, and wait for the first thing to emerge. When you go into the silence, you watch it unfold because you're still there. Your mind, your emotion, without prejudice, without judgment, living in the eternal now is there. That's why it's so powerful. And you're likely, when you go into the silence, to get a message for someone else that is close to you. As the folks found out last week, silence has some of the most powerful healing and visionary parts to it. It's absolutely amazing. So I beg people, implant that prayer of warning. Please, my God, every day, several times a day, cry up to the Creator from the core of your very soul. Please warn me. Then make frequent journeys into the silence that is sacred. It brings you into the eternal now that is free of judgment, words, past and future. You're so alive. Your awareness so acute on every level. Whether you go into that silence for 30 seconds or 3 minutes or 30 minutes, do it. It'll so change your life. I suggest to folks during sacred time, those devotions you do in the morning and the evening, going into that sacred time, go into it in silence, and then emerge from it in silence. And it'll change your whole day. Let's take a 5-minute break and thoughts of my voice, gang. Hey folks, welcome back. Since we're on the topic of silence, I want to read a couple of things from notes from the Hidden Secrets of Silence class that just ended yesterday. I believe, as did grandfather in the lineage, that silence is the foundation of all of our highest aspirations and visions, and it is the doorway to mastery in flesh and in spirit. Silence transcends all techniques, ways, and elements, for it is silence. For if silence is embraced and lived, all else becomes just a stepping stone, a way and a form of understanding. A quote from grandfather in 1966, and when you get up there into the late 60s, you can tell that this is more of the heavy teachings. He says, silence is the only true wisdom and the ultimate purity. He also said, silence is life lived to its fullest. And why he said that is because in silence you're so acutely aware, so alive, that it's life at its best. He went on to say that the greatest weapon a scout and a shaman, healer possesses is silence. I wanted to illustrate the power of that element, silence. If you haven't done this, I would suggest that after we end tonight, you take a walk. Not to anything, but towards something. Remember, grandfather was a creature of toward. He never went to anything. To was too confining. To put on blinders. When you move towards something, you have the latitude to explore, to pause, to savor. Move towards something, and as you do, move in and out of surrender, where you just completely surrender everything to a point where you virtually disappear. And then pay attention to what returns. After about 5 minutes of doing this, turn around and come back to your home, but this time, go in and out of silence. You know you're doing it when you just completely shed every word, every emotion, every prejudice, every judgment, the past, the future, time, destination, expectation, but you're still acutely aware and living in the eternal now. The difference between the surrender and the silence is staggering. That's why grandfather so pushed it in those latter years. All of you have a great responsibility. Grandfather said the only thing that stands between you and mastery is you. How bad do you want it? How bad do you need it? For you? No. For your family, your closest friends, your loved ones. There's going to come a time very soon that they're going to depend on you. Are you going to let them down? And I hear people say, oh, I don't have much time to practice. I'd never be able to get a hand drill going in the rain. Do you think the spirit world and the Creator will deny you a hand drill fire in the rain if lives depend on it and your heart is in a true place? No. All of us has a responsibility to our families, to our friend, to each other. As I said way back in the beginning in philosophy classes, we can do something that the dark side can't do. We can take care of each other. We can love each other. The dark side can't do that. They can't trust one another. They'll as soon climb over the dead backs of their brethren to get up that greasy ladder of power. Not us. Not us. That word family was not something that fell flippantly from grandfather's lips. It was a reality. And I never knew what he meant. At one time, I thought it was my Coyote Thunder group. Then I realized that grandfather, the way he said it, the way he talked about it was greater than that. Anyway, Tonight, I just wanted to meet with you briefly, telling you that some things are starting to evolve. The Central America Project, the center down there, the training center, pushing the healing centers throughout the country is because we sorely need them. Trackers out, students out there that feel so isolated and cut off, they got nobody to go to. And if they know there's somebody within 100 square miles of them that speak their same language, they'll go to them. But I also want to tell you that we're going to try to get updates like this at least every 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm going to be a little bit more diligent on my blog, where I want to put in more physical skills, the skills you don't see very often but are so essential to our survival. And forgive me for not going a full hour tonight, but my voice is failing after a week, and it's only been about 4 weeks or so since my heart surgery thingy, and I tend to run out of air a little bit. Anyway, in that vein of thought, I want to thank all of you who prayed so hard for me during that, that procedure, and those that are still yet to come. And those of you who prayed for each other, and some of the most miraculous healings I've heard of in the last year have taken place. We've lost quite a few of our members in this last year. It seems like now that every time we have a gathering for the keepers, we're scattering someone's ashes to the sacred, grandfather's sacred circle. We're so running out of time. Pray. Pray hard. Enter the silence when you pray. Grandfather said, in awareness is peace. He said that back in 1962, and I didn't know the level of awareness he was talking about until I entered the silence. And when I entered the silence and I watched that eternal now explode into such staggering acute awareness, I felt a peace and a knowing that I'd never felt before in my life, a connection to all things that I still can't describe. I love you all. Stay strong. Stay in touch with each other. Good night.